Everybody, what is going on? I am Chris Flowers. I'm the executive producer of the Biz Coach Show. And once again, we are on with the one and only Eric T. Whitmoyer, the founder and CEO of My Biz Coaches. What's going on, boss?
Doing well. How you doing this morning?
Well, as usual, we are pushing the limits of improvise, adapt, and overcome. We will persevere. We will get through this. But we're putting on the show, and no matter what, we're just like I said, we're driving on, right, brother?
That's right.
Here we have on Luis Acevedo. He is the founder of AIA Media. How you doing today, man?
I'm doing well, man. Glad to be on the show.
All right, you're gonna have to give us some technology tips here because, like I said, we're struggling today, but we're making it work. We're making it happen. Like I said, it's just that Army grunt, just mission first, drive on shit we're doing. So
there you go. I'll see what I can do.
All right, I'm going to read Luis in. It says he is the founder of AIA Media, focuses on training business owners and their team to implement AI. He's been in the AI space for 3 years and is a practitioner and almost a decade as a learner. All right. So, like I said, we're going to let Eric take over. He's going to conduct the interview, and I'll be in the background. I'll see you guys a little later.
In the rear with the gear.
I'm usually better outside the wire, but yeah, I'm going to go in the rear with the gear this time. See what kind of trouble I can cause.
yeah, that's what I'm worried about. All right, thanks. Appreciate it. Luis, thanks for being on. Excited to go our episode today as we'll be talking about all things AI. So super excited about the opportunity. We had a little prelude to this 2 weeks ago on one of the coaching calls.
Mm-hmm.
Just a bit of a conversation, high level, about where things are going, some of the opportunity in AI, and one of the things that you and I both, I think, were really kind of driving home was the concept and the idea that there's a pretty distinct gap between people who know what's going on and people are still trying to figure things out, and some people who think they know what's going on only know a surface level understanding of some of the information that's going on. And so we want to kind of share some of that information, maybe dispel some rumors, but more specifically, the primary focus for our channel and what we do here is to help our clients understand what they need to know and what's going to be something that they can implement into their business and get at least somewhat immediate ROI on it, right? So as we, a lot of the things that we'll do is we talk about any of the high level stuff, just kind of draw it back home and remind clients, okay, this is why this is important. This is how it's likely going to impact your business this week, next month, next year, 3 years from now, whatever that looks like. So again, Luis, thanks for being here. Take just a minute to share a little bit about your path in this. I know it's been a couple of years now. I mean, AI is only like 3 years old. So, well, let me rephrase that. What we know of, at least for the most people out there, right? Mm-hmm. It's about 3 years old since the launch of ChatGPT. But as you and I both know, that's been going on for 20 or 30 years in the background at different levels of growth and application for the bigger companies. But only recently has it become to a point now where the small companies can actually play in the space and gain some of the benefit. And the arbitrage between those that know and don't know is where the real opportunity. And I think you and I both agree with that.
100%. Yeah. So I really got into the space probably around the time that I read the book by Ray Kurzweil called The Singularity is Near. I'm not quite sure when it was published, but I remember reading it back in like 2016, 2017. And it was really interesting to me. There's a lot of things that I disagree with that man on, but nonetheless, I really liked the idea of a technological future more so than what we have now. And I think that there's a lot of good technology can do for humanity if used correctly. And so that was about 10 years ago that I really began my journey in exploring these ideas from a philosophical standpoint and learning about it. And about 3-4 years ago, I actually had a media company before this called A1A Media. And I had the privilege of interviewing people that are at the forefront of a lot of the philosophical discussions in regards to AI, from people like Zoltan Ivan, who I'm pretty sure not a lot of people know about him, but he ran for president in like 2016. He was the leader and the founder of the Transhumanist Party. I spoke with the current president of the Transhumanist Party. and a couple other people who are big in the space, like Dr. Aubrey DeGray, James Turney. And I really just dove deep into understanding the concepts and then trying to see how I could more so align it with my worldview, because they have vastly different worldviews than I do. And that really started to come in fruition when AI became more accessible to people who aren't necessarily technical. I have taken a couple coding classes back in the day on Python. That is the extent of my practical knowledge when it comes to anything related technology, and plugging in an HDMI cord, like that's it. I can use the internet, I can browse, all those things. But so I really started to dive into it once ChatGPT became public and everybody can really use it. I was an early user to it, started to create also like chatbots and just simple automations, which were a lot more difficult to do back then than they are now. Now it's really simple to do, and there's a lot of free templates out there people can use. But yeah, and then in April, I was in Kansas City in a hotel room just thinking to myself, what am I going to do? I was out there because I accepted a job offer for a sales management position. I was going to open up an office in Columbus, Ohio. Money was really good. And I was just kind of an in-between phase. I had sold my prior company in December, and I didn't really know what I was going to do. So I just took this position. They flew me out to Kansas City, and I was in my hotel room, and I was like, I don't really want to do this. And I want to keep working for myself. So I then started to dive more into the AI space and seeing where I could maybe create a business. And I just took the plunge from there in my hotel room. I started the business. I had the idea generated. I knew exactly what I was going to do. And that following day, I actually got my first client through Instagram to help him out do some AI automation projects on his Instagram page. And then sequentially, I got another client, and then my third client, and things just kept rolling from there. And that's where we are today.
Amazing. Well, that's awesome. I appreciate you sharing that. I think that the couple of key takeaways, just as it relates for the clients, again, the opportunity for someone to just kind of determine, hey, there's a business model here. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but I see the opportunity, the gap, as I mentioned. And what I remind my clients of, and even, coaches, as you know, we have a number of coaches, is reminding them that, look, there's an arbitrage between what everybody else knows and what those who know. And it's the capitalization of that arbitrage is what creates that opportunity for us to be able to sell our knowledge, our insight, our experience, whatever that might be. And some obviously have a bigger arbitrage than others based on the amount of experience that they were able to attain. But this particular scenario in AI specifically, like it was in the computer's early days, right? Like it was in my particular case in the wireless technology early days, there was a huge arbitrage because nobody really knew what it was, and everybody thought they knew what it was. And like I said, those who thought they figured it out would then learn it, like myself, even in the early days of wireless. I'm like, oh yeah, I think I know how the towers work. Come to find out, I had no idea how the towers actually worked. And consequently, later on realized, oh wow, there's a lot to be gained here insight wise. But I think the key takeaway here for people is to identify, particularly as it relates to AI, and you and I have shared some names of some people that we follow. Liam, I can't remember his last name. Otley, yes, thank you. Somebody I've followed for the last 2 years or so now with what he's done, and he's like he saw it early on, like early months of ChatGPT, jumped in year one, spun it up into a few $100,000 a year AI business, and now has a full-blown consulting model. Last I saw, it was 3 million plus annually. I'm sure it's grown beyond that, because I'm going to say it was probably late last year was the last time I heard those numbers. So quite interesting to see that and how that's evolved in just a short period of time. And he himself is only in his early 20s.
Right. He's a young guy.
Yeah. So, and he even told the story that he was only 17 or 18 when he first started messing around with different things. And it was the AI thing that he went all in on because he saw the window of opportunity. So,
100%. Yeah. And I think that that's like the most important thing people can do is once you see opportunity, you have to seize the moment and run with it.
Yep.
And I want to kind of circle back to the origin story of A1A Media because it's very pertinent to what we're talking about now. And at the time when I got my clients, I didn't even really have a solid offer. I didn't really know what I was going to do. I just knew that I wanted to be in the space. I knew I was good at communicating with people and that I could express these ideas in a way so they could really understand them. And I also had the technical skills, if you will, to connect nodes, to create workflows. And so I originally went into it thinking, all right, I'm going to be a full-on AI agency where I just do implementations. Well, come to find out, after I started talking with other agency owners, there was a bigger gap in the market. And the bigger gap in the market comes into play with education. They have experienced time and time again where they would implement solutions and their clients would either not use them, would not know how to use them, would be afraid to use them, whatever it may be, or they would use them, but they wouldn't know what to do. They were completely dependent on the agency. And after talking with them about this, I come to find out that I have a huge opportunity here in regards to education, which is where I feel more suited to be in than the implementation phase. I can do the implementations. I have my own AI solutions I've created, but I am more able to communicate these ideas in a way with a larger group of people that may not be technical, may be intimidated with it. And so they've even told me these things too. So I ran with that. And that's kind of what we've now morphed into, is a educational company that we do work-based training for AI for business owners and their employees. And then we connect them with an implementation agency if they do not want to do it on their own. So we have those relationships now from my company to other agencies. And now I fill that bigger gap there because there's going to be a ton of opportunity for people to sell implementation, but I think that there's a big arbitrage right now in education.
Yeah, agreed. And one of the comments that I made the other night when we were on that coaching call was the idea that AI or any of the technologies that I played, like I said, the wireless technology, I got really deep into digital marketing. There's the ongoing developmental gap that takes place because if you don't understand the base knowledge, so I broke it down into arithmetic, right? Mm-hmm. If you can't add and subtract and multiply, then you won't be able to multiply and divide. If you can't multiply and divide, you can't do basic algebra. If you can't do basic algebra, you won't be able to do calculus. And consequently, it's similarly with this technology. Once you understand the basics of it, it builds on itself, and the ability to stay up with it is much easier. If you come into this 3-4 years into it and you're trying to learn and get the 4 years worth of education crammed in to understand so you can begin to implement it at year 4, 5, 6, and 7, it's going to be substantially harder. And that's part of what problem people are coming into. People who are not early adopters to technology are struggling with, what does this do? What is it even about? Is it ethical? Is it, it's like all the things that go through our heads in that process, right? And then they identify, okay, it's something I should learn. And then ironically, then you have somebody like myself who's probably a step or two below you where you're at with the education phase. And I'm saying, I don't know exactly what it is, but I'm digging in to understand, because I'm going to tell you right now, what I do know very clearly is if you don't get on board with it, you're going to be in a bad spot 2, 3, 4 years from now. And that is I can see that the writing is on the wall. The irony is I think, I'm a bit more seasoned than you are. And there are a number of people that are my age, let's say 50 and up, that are, they've seen a number of technological advances over the last 30 years. And they've looked at it and said, is it beta or is it VHS? Right? Is it the CD or the CD-ROM or the floppy disk, right? So whatever the evolution was on these different components, and for people my age, there's a natural inclination to look at those things and say, we don't know what the front runner is on this. But the real learning lesson isn't whether or not we know what the front runner is. It's the fact that we know that this technology is going to dramatically change business as we know it. And so I don't care if it's ChatGPT or Claude or any of the other software, AI solutions that are out there. And and I'll ask you, we'll probably dig into that a little bit, but it doesn't matter which one it is. Mm-hmm. And all of them have different use cases. the reality is, at the end of the day, it is going to change business in a dramatic way. It's already begun that shift. And it's ironic that there's still people out there that are sitting on the sidelines going, yeah, I don't know. I don't think I need to understand this.
No, I think you're 100% right. And I think a big reason for that is we are pushed down our throats the idea that curiosity killed the cat. No. Curiosity makes you rich. Like, curiosity makes you successful. Being able to be open-minded and try new things. And even with the mindset of saying, I don't know what is actually going to lead the market. Nobody does. Right. All you can do is just get into the space. That's all you can do. You got to be in the arena. And once you're there, you can then begin to better discern who's going to make it, who's not going to make it, where you should put your energy, because now you actually have real world experience as opposed to being a spectator and trying to determine when is the best time to jump in. You were talking about people like in your generation, you guys have seen so many technological developments over the course of your lifetime. And so it's kind of interesting to me that there's a lot of hesitation as well, despite the fact that there have been so many narratives that when the typewriter, I know this is way before your time, but this goes back a long time. When the typewriter came out, people were against the typewriter. When the camera came out, people said it was going to ruin artistry. When the computers came out, it was just a fad. When the internet came out, it was just a fad. When crypto came out, it was just a fad. All of these things are just fads until they're not. And really, you just have to dive into the space and have the ability to see through the noise and trust yourself. Because if you just go off of your life experience, you'll be able to realize really quickly that a lot of these things are here to stay. You may just not know what is here to stay. But the technology itself and learning let's say you learn an AI tool today that is completely dead next month. Guess what? That AI tool that you learn is going to have fundamentals that you can then cross over into other things that then make you better as you develop. So there shouldn't be a fear of, am I getting into the right thing or not?
Right.
Now, this is coming from a person who's I'm a big risk taker. I've been big into crypto for a while, and I've taken a lot of big risk in my life. So it's just natural to me to do this. But I think people can do that at a much more, reasonable level for themselves, just dipping their toes in the water, actually figuring out what these tools do. So that way you can then just cross-reference the skills that you learn as you develop.
Agreed. Yeah, exactly. And that, like I said, that analogy, when I use that and with people and I say, look, it's basic arithmetic, then it's multiplication, and like they get it. It resonates with them. I said, but if you can't add and subtract, you can't do the next level up. And so you have to at some point dig in and start learning it, because if you don't, you're not going to be able to jump to algebra or calculus. And consequently, and here's the other thing, this is interesting too, and I draw this back to digital marketing. My education of digital marketing was already well out there. It was well entrenched. I didn't start really understanding it until about 5 years ago-ish, I would say. And I made a conscious effort to do it. And I did it through a trade of service, which I might have shared with you or not. But, I had a client that was like, hey, I could use some coaching. I'm not sure I could afford your premium rates. I'm like, hey, I need to understand digital marketing. So here's the deal. I'll train you for 90 minutes. You train me for 90 minutes weekly. And I will get, an MBA in digital marketing was my plan, basically, for all intents and purposes. And so for 2 years, I did that. My understanding of digital marketing, I still wouldn't go out there and try and say I can do your pay-per-click marketing strategy or anything like that, but I definitely understand it in a very unique way, in a way that the arbitrage that existed for me previously is a much, much smaller gap. And I know who the people are who know what they're talking about, and I know how to find those people to identify where I want to spend my money and who's going to be my partner. And I think that's as I look at most small business owners, that's the opportunity, is that if you don't know what you don't know, which we use that phrase so much in coaching, then the issue is you're going to have to pay that premium. Mm-hmm. Right. And so to your point, like you in that regard, I'm very much about education. I want to provide that insight and that understanding so that you can, in some ways, not get taken advantage of, but more specifically, know what you're asking for, because that's half the battle. I don't think that people who maybe spend a lot of money on SEO and didn't get the results, for instance, I don't think that the person was nefarious in trying to overcharge them and charge them a lot of money. I think that the client didn't know what they were asking for, got a solution that they didn't know to capitalize on. You kind of referenced that earlier, right? And consequently couldn't look back and say that 12-month investment of $36,000 actually was worth the investment that they made. More likely because they didn't understand what they were asking for and consequently didn't get the result that they were looking for.
I was just talking to an agency owner, and he was telling me a story about his brother who had started a digital marketing company. And he said there were a couple clients that were upset regarding the results, but the issue was not necessarily on the marketing agency. It was on the client because they had delayed marketing campaigns. They didn't fully understand what was being implemented. They weren't patient enough. Now, mind you, this is kind of like a yin and yang thing between coaches, consultants, agencies, and the business owners who are paying for their service and their knowledge. Unfortunately, we live in a world today where I think that when you pay for something, you automatically assume entitlement of whatever that is, as opposed to understanding that it is a working relationship. Yep. And I think it's super imperative, especially as we go into the AI space, to do that. I think even with coaching, like what you do, I do a form of coaching, if we're being totally honest. This is kind of what I do, but just more so for AI. But it's a two-way street. You can't teach somebody who doesn't want to be taught. And if you can give them all the tools that they need to be successful, but if they don't know how to use those tools, or if they just lack the trust in you to execute, there's going to be inadequate results as a result of that.
Right. Yeah, great point. And I think that really kind of sums up that opportunity there, because at the end of the day, that's the challenge. Because to your point, I can recount a ton of scenarios where I've had clients that maybe spent too much money on a website or spent too much money on some marketing campaign, and I got nothing from it. And I'm like, no, you got a $12,000 website. The challenge is you didn't need a $12,000 website.
Right.
You needed
to use a $12,000 website. How do you make it worth your money?
Exactly. And in their business where they're at, they didn't need that, but they didn't know what to ask for. Right. And so, and to your point, I think the other part, and I really love the way you said it, it is a collaboration when you work with people like ourselves. I can give you the guidance and insight that I know work with, my business, maybe a dozen other businesses, maybe a couple of dozen other businesses that will help you move from where you are to where you want to go, depending on where you're stuck. But the truth of the matter is, if you're not coachable, if you can't implement the strategies, if you can't get execution through your team, or whatever the challenge might potentially be, I can have all the insight in the world. It's not going to matter if you lack the ability to get that, or if you lack the understanding, right, to implement. So there has to be a collaboration there, and the person has to meet you, maybe not halfway, but they have to make some kind of investment. I literally just heard a marketing, talking to a marketing partner, and he's like, I was so frustrated because the client was asking for this result, and here's the issue. At the end of the day, they didn't take part in the collaboration meetings that would help us identify who their target audience was, blah, 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 blah. And now they're frustrated because they're not getting the result. And the reality was they never made the investment. So AI is going to be the exact same scenario. You're going to get out of it what you put into it. Mm-hmm. And what I've definitely uncovered is that if you're not digging in and making the effort. Now, the nice thing is, somebody like yourself, I can reach out to you and say, hey, Luis, I've got this use application. What's the best solution? How would you recommend going about this? Whatever that conversation is. But because I have a base understanding, I know what I'm asking for, and I know if it's within the confines. And actually, at that point, then I'm coming to you and saying, hey, can we do this with the current technology? If we could, what would it look like? And give me a ballpark idea what that might cost me. And then I know whether or not I'm wasting my time or if it's something I can actually pull off. But that's the difference of understanding, having a base knowledge and having zero base knowledge, because now at that point, it's just something out there that I can't appreciate.
Yeah, I completely agree with that 100%. I think that it's fundamental that people just get to the basics as to what they are trying to do in their business in the context of AI specifically. Just look at what you're already doing. Just track your business model, what tasks you're doing, and then begin to question if AI can even help you. That is
Right.
where I think the most important starting point is to first off, understand your business, your data, your clientele, your model so well that you can then ask, after you have all the tasks that you do for every department, where can AI help and can AI help? And then begin to go from there. Like before you even think about automations or things of that nature, I think business owners would be better off asking themselves that question first before moving forward.
Yeah. And I think the key there is, as you mentioned, is that they have to know their business well enough to be able to ask those right questions. So
Right.
as you mentioned that, starting off with some of the basic stuff, I know that you recently conducted a training session for our clients on LinkedIn, and it was a masterclass in prompting was the technology, and probably one of the most basic things. And ironically, initial feedback I got from people, and when I first introduced what we were doing, they're like, "Well, that's kind of like 2 years ago," and I'm like, "Yeah." And there's still a ton of people that don't know how to use it correctly.
Right.
And even I learned some tips from you during that, and I've been using it pretty actively for over 2 years. So, when people say that, it's like, but do us a favor and share a little bit about just kind of your concept on that perspective of the prompting and kind of how you see that evolving into understanding of the technology.
Yeah, I mean, it's real simple. If you look at all the big companies in the AI space, their crown jewel of the company is either their prompt or the evaluation. Not like everything else is secondary. So, and if you like, I look at it from a wrestler's perspective. I know that you learn all these different skill sets when you wrestle, right? And you learn all these different techniques. You can do some really cool moves. But what do the greats do? What do the greats do? They just do the basics. Like Bruce Lee said that he fears the man who does 1,000 kicks a day, not the man who does 1,000 different kicks a day. And so the real reason I tend to focus a lot on prompting is because it's at the core of everything you do. If you've ever built an AI agent, you know that you need to prompt that AI agent to have a set of instructions, and that's a prompt. If you are going to have any kind of structure for your automation, there's going to be prompting involved. And so it is the most basic thing, but it's the most fundamental thing. And it gets very advanced. Like it's not just simply asking it a question or telling it to do something for you. You can then, once you learn how to prompt very well, you can begin to get better quality prompts because not all prompts are equal. I can put in, hey, tell me the best place to go on vacation for my family of 5. And then Eric puts in, act as a travel advisor. I have a family of 5. These are the age ranges. These are our budget. Hey, we're planning on going here, but maybe we go here. Plan out these 2 ideas and then give us a unique one based on our preferences. You're going to get totally different results. And so that is where I think people misinterpret the fundamental and the powerfulness of prompting in and of itself. Just being able to prompt, you can do so much. You can be ahead of so many people just by being able to prompt very well.
Yeah, such a great point. Ironically, as you're saying that, I'm reminded of a conversation I had with an employee. I'm going to say 20 years ago, easy, maybe 18, 19, something like that. And literally, the challenge was up and coming manager, leader, doing a great job, working really hard, but struggling with some conversations. And it literally came down to the language, the wording, the way they positioned their messaging, and communicating effectively. And it was at that point when I identified, and it was ironic because I'm going to say I had a half a dozen situations in a single week where it was something that I communicated that did not land correctly. I'm coaching this individual through a similar scenario. I'm coaching another person through another scenario, very similar as well. And ironically, I just watched somebody in an organization that's probably 3 levels higher than where I'm at within my organization. And they're having the exact same problem. And what it came down to is communication. Our ability to communicate or to effectively say what we need to say and what we want to say. And there's often a tendency to say as little as possible because lots of time we get that kind of guidance. Keep it short and crisp. Okay, we'll keep it short and crisp, but still be concise. Still be sure that you get your message across, right? And ironically, as you say all that about prompting, it just all came flooding back to me. And as a reminder, is that we already aren't that great at communicating in many cases. Either we're too verbose and sharing too much information and going too deep into details and telling stories, or we could be the other side and we're too short, too crisp, too brief in our explanation. And consequently, in either scenario, we don't get the end result we're looking for. And so it's really identifying what's the sweet spot and how to get what we want. And to your point, with prompting, I've done it, right? I literally had a page-long prompt, and I got the material as it spit out, and I was like, "What? That's just way too much. That wasn't what I was looking for." All the time that I spent on it, I'm like, "Now I got to go back and recreate it." And then consequently, I've thrown something in there just quick off the cuff, and I'm like, "Oh well, that sucks." Right. I got to go back and I get more direction, more detail, more specifics to help identify the result that I'm looking for.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of times when people just hear, like, staying on the topic of prompting, when people hear prompting, they think, oh, I give it something I want it to do and a question to answer. And the first thing it spits out, it's gold. Wow. I'm impressed. It generated it in 2.5 seconds. But AI, ChatGPT, they're all prone to hallucinations. They're riddled with it. And so what needs to be done is the same way. I like to view it this way. When I have an idea, even if the idea is really good, it's my first idea, I know there's something there, I'm not just running with that rough idea, right? Like in school, we're taught you write a first draft, a second draft, and your final draft. Now you can have as many second, third, fourth drafts as you like until you get it to where you want it to be. But the idea is there's a refinement process that goes into the results that are generated from the prompt itself. So you can have a really great prompt. And if you have a really great prompt, your refinement process is going to be truncated tremendously, right? Now, if your prompt is weak, you're going to have to do a lot of refinement over time. And then you may just have to start all over, because once you start having longer conversations and forcing it to hold a longer term memory inside of that chat, it begins to hallucinate more, give false information, not really aligned with the original topic. It can't hold a conversation like a human can. And so if you can be more precise and concise at the same time and keep your refinement process shorter, the results will be that much better as well. Like one thing I like to do is I actually have a notebook here that I write in. This notebook here, I basically will write out like a bunch of ideas I have throughout the day, things I'm working on, whatever. And then before I even go to prompt it, I already have the idea fleshed out. So once I want to go and have AI do my first draft for something, or write a script, or help me flesh out an idea, I've already generated most of it on my own. Now I'm looking for a thinking partner. It's not something that I offload my work to. It's something rather that I collaborate with. I use it as a tool, not as a crutch. And that is a big distinction I think people need to be aware of, is if you lean on it as a crutch, you're going to be caught. Like, people are going to eventually realize and become more AI literate that you're just pushing out AI slop. Whereas if you can learn to use it as a tool and a collaboration partner, it is going to make you that much more productive if that's what you're aiming for. And also, hopefully, should be the main goal, generate more money and free time for yourself.
Awesome. So we talked quite a bit about prompting and some of the other things that we're talking about. Great points, by the way. Let me ask this. There's a number of software programs that are integrating AI into them. Not the least of which we offer our program, which is Partner Pro, which the company that designed that software has embedded an AI solution into it. And now we can actually create, on the marketing side of the business, we can actually create landing pages, we can create copy, we can do all kinds of stuff, but it's in the confines of the software of itself, right? In and of itself, it'll do some of the automations. It'll say, what do you want to accomplish? And then you tell you what I want. And so the prompts are kind of built into the software. I've used a number of marketing solutions like that. I've played with a bunch of them. We've also used a number of photo and video iteration software, right? It'll take it and put me in different places or whatever, make me look different, all that kind of stuff. Give us some feedback on your take on that as it relates to the difference between prompting and then using that type of design software for application within the businesses?
Yeah, so like something that comes to my mind is like NAN or Make, where you can actually create the automations or the AI agents themselves. In that particular scenario, you do need to be a little bit more technical because you're going to be connecting APIs, and then you're going to have to know what sites that you want to connect with what and how it's going to flow. So that's like a little bit more complicated of a subject to really cover. But really, I think that if you go into, say, I use NAN if I create an automation, the really cool thing is there are so many free templates out there. So if you wanted to create a workflow that's completely automated off of a CRM like Go High Level or something like that, you can do that totally on your own. You don't even need a lot of these CRMs anymore. You could actually generate your own CRM through things like Lovable and Cursor. Yeah, so like just to begin to go outside of the prompting space, if you wanted to go right into the automation space, I would then go to probably Make is the easiest one to really learn because it's just very visual. And it's just a matter of connecting dots. And then you'll realize as you're connecting dots and APIs, which are all underlying skills that you will develop just from practicing, just create a simple workflow. It's not super hard. You can make something as simple as, I want you every time I put some new information in this Google Sheet to then send me an email. And that's the workflow. And so that's like another way that you can go beyond the prompting that would be less intimidating, or you can just change up the kind of prompting you're doing and use a tool like Gamma, Manus, GenSpark, which are all other not really large language models, but they offer different AI solutions, whereas Gamma, it creates landing pages on the fly through prompting. It creates presentations, documents, everything that you could imagine in regards to those things. It can do from a prompt, from a list of things you have. Manus also is like a large language model, and everything else that you can do, like what I said with Gamma, you can use that. And then GenSpark is something that I really enjoy using. It has a super agent mode on there, which basically allows you to have an AI agent for free, but you have a limited amount of credits. So be mindful as to, if you're using the free version, what you're using it for, because then you're going to have to wait a month again to regain your credits, right? But that when you have an AI agent, you can then crawl the web. You can have it pull information without you doing anything. You just prompt it exactly on how you want it to operate, and it will fulfill the task, from looking for jobs for you, for looking at the best YouTube videos for you to watch to learn something, to putting together a travel itinerary, to, you know, you can even go as so far as to putting in your company's data in there and having it create its own spreadsheet or workflow or things of that nature. So those would be other kind of tools that go beyond just the simple prompting with ChatGPT and Gemini that I think are really good for people to get into. But it really just depends on what your business is, right? Like, I don't really think there's this one size fit all. It really depends on what you're trying to solve for in your business and what your goal is. That will then determine what tools you should use.
Yeah, great point. Interesting that you mentioned that. As you say that, I'm thinking to myself, as you know, we have what I call the 6 core competencies within business. And ironically, I've said on many occasions that we inherently bring as individuals 1 to 3 of those 6 core competencies to the table, right? Based on our life experiences, our work experiences, just naturally what comes, natural to us. Those all kind of play a role into the of the 6 core competencies, which ones are easier for us, let's say. And generally, the contrary is whatever I'm good at, there's a flip to that I'm not. So if I'm good at sales, generally not so patient for operations, right? Or finance, or whatever the contrary is on the scenarios. But to your point, if I understand it well enough in those core competencies that I'm comfortable with, I can actually really go deep with the AI work and develop some agents or whatever that might be really valuable. Certainly some good quality prompts that will help accentuate my work. Mm-hmm. And as we've talked about on other occasions, the challenge is if you don't really understand that core competency, your value, the AI value to you is not nearly as good because you can't speak to it with enough depth and understanding. And so to that point, the value of AI isn't there. I just, as I'm thinking through that, it's one of the things that I'm going to drive home a little bit more. So,
Yeah,
because I think that's a key point as you're referencing, because even the extension of those additional softwares that you just referenced, I'm realizing that if you get into that and you start building your own GPTs, that you really truly have to understand how to prompt effectively to be able to build the GPT and be able to get the real result that you're trying to accomplish, because it'll be a multiples of iteration before you actually get to the finished solution.
Yeah, and that's all going to come down to communicating, and it's a little bit different form of communication too, because it's not a human you're communicating with. Right. So you need to be a little bit more precise. And there's even a format that a lot of the top prompt engineers use, and it's the XML format, which is, I think, the coding language that these large language models are trained on. And so you format your prompt in the same format that you would have for that specific coding language, but just in human language, just like regular language, as opposed to numbers, symbols, etc. for general coding. There's different formats that you can use, the same way that there are different ways that we communicate in different settings, right? Like if I'm at my job or I'm going at a professional setting, I'm going to communicate much differently than I will if I'm just getting a beer with you, we're just talking about whatever. It's going to be a different form of communication. And so that's why I think it's super fundamental, even before you begin to prompt, do you actually understand your own business and what you're trying to communicate to your customers and how they receive messaging? Because that's how you should be talking to your AIs. That's how you should be communicating to them, to not so much train them, because you can't really train them unless you build your own, but you can shift you can add to their memory bank for you specifically, which will then help you in the long run and better catering your messaging towards your audience and whatever it is you're trying to do. So you just have to know your business, know your target demographic and how to communicate to them, and then translate that over into an AI tool.
Yeah. I'll share an example of myself. When I first started using GPT in the beginning, I would given direction that I should upload my books that I had written. So I upload my books into the system, and then I upload some of my newsletters that I had written and some other white papers that I've done. And so now when I use it to help me craft a post, a daily post or an article for another newsletter, it actually begins to reference my own content. Mm-hmm. So when it has a use case that, references a story that I told in a particular book or an example that I used, it's actually, instead of pulling something else, it's actually using the stuff that I put in. And after a while, I started looking at it. It was after about a year or so. I'm reading the content, and I'm like, man, it doesn't take a whole lot of editing now at this point. It is a reflection of what I have. Better grammar, better sentence structure. But it is the tone, it is the logic that I would have followed as far as, here are the bullet points that I want you to be able to execute on. I'm very particular about making sure that when I bring up a topic, I share a concern, I share my overarching philosophy or thought process, and then I share a series of ways that you can improve on it, right? That's as an educator, that's kind of the way and so here's the key takeaways that you can implement in your business and get result from it today. Well, it does it by default now. I mean, it's like I put in the topic of what I want to talk about, and I used to do about 30% of it. I would have to edit. Man, it's not much now, and it's because it's and I keep every once in a while I'll take some other articles and upload it in there, and it gets more information about how I write. And then I started just recently introducing other authors in there, and some new concepts that I had not really kind of thought about, but I wanted to integrate it as a business coach. And I'm like, and now it's improving, right? It's actually adding that stuff as well. So it's been an interesting perspective, really kind of take it to the next level as I continue to give it more good information to draw from to help identify, what kind of messaging I want to share and what I want to get from the result.
Yeah, because contrary to popular belief, it does not reason, it does not think, it doesn't understand. Right. It only operates on the information it has been given pre-training and the memory that it now has, it can now add additional things to you specifically and then help cater your results. And that's why just putting in the right information, as you're saying, is so important. And you just really have to know what you're aiming for. Like, you have to use it with a purpose. Now,
Right.
You don't necessarily need to use it for a purpose when you're just learning, but in order to get to the point where you know how to use it for specific reasons, you have to just like start playing with it. So you get an understanding how to communicate with it, how to use it properly.
Yeah, great point. So let's do this. I mentioned let's touch on a couple of the different LLMs, right? What are the handful of them, and more specifically, what are the most common ones, and what are the use applications where they really stand out or are strongest at?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it's a highly contested, debated topic amongst people in the space. But obviously, everybody knows ChatGPT. It's really fast. It's really good at what it does, and that is, it does good image generating on the fly. It can give you very concise information in a way that is digestible, which is really nice. It does hallucinate, so you have to use discernment when you are using it. But for the most part, it gives a lot of good information. There's a deep research function in there that I appreciate. However, I find Gemini 2.5's deep research, which is another large language model that is created or founded rather by Google. That's their large language model. Their deep research function, I think, is far superior. Their writing in regards to making media posts, writing scripts for YouTube videos, I find to be better, more fluent. That's where I think people who are in the space may disagree with me and say, well, Claude is better at all of the writing. And so Claude is another one that it's made by Anthropic, is the company that's created Claude. And that one is really known for its writing function. And Claude 4.0 is, to my knowledge, as of to this date, the best AI coding tool out on the market. Mm-hmm. Now, one other thing, like I can keep listing these off. There's XAI, Grok, right, that I like. I think Grok is really good. It's underrated. I'm very surprised. I'm very much looking forward to seeing how Llama develops over time, which is Meta's AI, their large language model. They just poached like 8 people from OpenAI, their top researchers. So I think that OpenAI is in for a world of trouble. And then Apple, on a quick side note, just put Perplexity, which is another large language model, as their fundamental AI to have Siri on. So it's Claude. My apologies. It's Claude, not Perplexity. That was a rumor, but it's officially now Claude and not OpenAI. So OpenAI is under a lot of pressure right now from these other companies. But one place that I would go and look if you're trying to find the best tools, there's a lot of debate on this as well, but I think the noise aside, it's a very useful thing to do if you're trying to figure out what tool is going to be best for your business, is go to LM Arenas. And that is a website. Well, it's another AI tool, but basically they have a leaderboard for all of the best AI tools out there and what they're best for, specifically LMs, large language models. So Gemini has been at the top of everything aside for a couple categories. ChatGPT, OpenAI, is number 1 for nothing. So it's either Gemini 2.5 or DeepSeek or Claude. Those are the other 2 that are number 1 in different areas. But basically that will give you a breakdown as to what are the best LLMs to use for certain things. If you go to LM Arena, they'll have a leaderboard for it. And then you can even talk on their website to their LLM as well. But yeah, so that's a very, very, I think, important place to start as well, to just go there. If you're like, once you get past all the beginning stages, go to LM Arena. All right, if I have nobody else to coach me, what are the people saying? What is being voted on? What is giving the best results for these specific things? Just look at the leaderboard and then figure out which one's going to be best for you.
Great point. I really appreciate you sharing that. I think it's a great resource for people who have kind of gravitated to that level of understanding and are maybe ready for the next thing, whatever that is for them. So let's do this. What are some of the let's talk about video just real quick, because I know that's an important one. I personally am not a big fan of the video renderings, or sorry, the picture renderings that we see in some of the different platforms. Not really impressed a whole lot, although I'm not the most imaginative person. So the renderings that I see, and I'm not trying to recreate, snow leopards, chasing whatever. I'm looking to put Eric in a business scene where he's networking with people that probably pretty lame and not really a whole lot of a draw from there. But that aside, both from a picture rendering, which, as you know, I use Artflow AI, and now I use New Hero. And I had a great conversation with the CEO from that company of Artflow, which also launched New Hero AI. And phenomenal conversation with the CEO. We spent about almost 2 hours on the call talking about his software and how I was using it. And he really wanted to understand how I was using it. And amazing software. I really love their software. We also have the video rendering of the HeyGens and things like that, where they're taking video and creating content with that. But just high level, let's talk about a few of those applications. What are some of your favorites? And what are the use applications there?
So VO3, I have to have a ton of subscriptions as part of my job, to be up to date with all of these things. But VO3 is probably the best video generator on the market right now. If you wanted to use something like that, now it does take skill. That's a whole nother skill set. And I get why you would say you don't really care for them and what they're generating, because that then requires you to learn how to talk like a photographer and a videographer, which I actually paid, believe it or not, 3 years ago, I paid $3,000 a month to learn how to talk to these machines. So I literally was taking like college level courses from an expert who was making millions of dollars back then, not millions, but 7-figure at least. And I learned how to actually generate really good images because I learned new words. I didn't even know where to begin to, how do I want this angle? What's this angle called? I see this angle in a movie, but there's a technical term for it. And if you're able to communicate that technical term, that AI is going to know how to use that because it's trained on all of those things. So when it comes to video, just understand, like, you can be the most creative person, but your results are going to be determined on how well you communicate as a videographer or a photographer. So you have to then learn the language of other fields. That's why, I'm not the biggest fan of Sam Altman, but he does say one thing that I really agree with, and that the future is for the generalist, not the specialist. And this is where, if you really want to become lethal with AI, you have to be very general. So just begin to be super curious about other industries. Because if you're going to make good videos, you're going to need to know how to not just get the right shot, but how to make it in a sequence. How do you speak to it so that way you can train it, so that way you're like, all right, I have this image, now I want this image, and in this image, I want to keep everything the same from this image, but this. So now you're going to need to learn how to do character consistency, which is a big issue I see from a lot of people who are very creative and in the space. Is how do you maintain character consistency? I find that Midjourney is a very good tool for character consistency. ChatGPT, it's hit or miss. It makes really good images, and its video program, Zora, I believe it's what it's called, is not that great. I'm not a big fan. I think they're lagging way behind on that, but those are really good entry points. Like if all you have is ChatGPT and you want to start learning how to do image generation, what a seed value is, because when an image is generated, you get a seed value. That seed value is essentially the ID for that image. And so knowing how to use that seed value will contribute to your consistency throughout. But once again, you're going to have to know how to input it. You're going to have to know how to communicate towards it. So right now, I would suggest for most people, just deal with ChatGPT. If you want to get really into the nitty gritty of like the videos and how to make them well and go viral, make a faceless YouTube channel and make millions from it. You got to learn like VO3, right? Like VO3 is the one to go. That's why you're seeing all these Sasquatch doing the vlog style videos where they're just in absurd situations. That kind of went viral a few days ago. Now you have people recreating scenes from the Bible, recreating scenes throughout history. They got George Washington doing vlogs about him crossing the river, and it's just very creative. But in order for you to even do those things, you need to know how to communicate to it like a videographer.
That's great. That's great insight. I know very little about as it relates to the video and the picture rendering component of it. And I know that there's some people who really dive into that, but it's interesting. You mentioned being able to speak to it like a videographer, somebody a director of a movie. I can see where that logic would really play in. I'd like it to do this. I want it to pan in this way. None of which would really resonate with me in that regard. Right.
Yeah.
So great points. Really appreciate that. All right. So let's, as we get to closing it out here, let's talk through a few last things. One of the big things that I talk about is ROI. What's the return on investment? I really think that's a challenge to identify what that is right now today, to your point. And I think we kind of driven that point home. What I do know, and I think was more important for us to address right now, is really driving home the message that you can't avoid adopting this if you intend to be in business in the next 3 to 5 years. What I see just in digital automations, let's not talk about prompting. Let's not talk about, just the AI solutions that are out there as it relates to digital automations, getting, when a client requests something, that it automatically is sent back to me. That is a version of, some AI solutions, right? I'm identifying what the sequence of items that should take place, and it happens automatically without my engagement. A client decides that they want my book, right? They go and they click on the link, they get the book's delivered to them, they read the book. If it's an ebook, right, they can click on links in the ebook that take them to other places to get information. Those types of things are necessary. And I got a lot of great feedback. So let's say that. I thought it was a great article, but I got a lot of great feedback in a newsletter that I wrote. It was specifically about the service industries that are out there that are not adapting the technology that's coming. And so when we go one step further with the AI, it's the text back solution. When you're not available to answer a phone call, and say you're a solopreneur plumber and you're underneath the sink hammering away on whatever, and somebody calls you and you can't answer, but the AI can pick up on your behalf, answer the call, lead the customer through a conversation, and give them a result. Schedule an appointment, schedule for another phone call, request a follow-up call, whatever it is, right? But the AI can actually act on the business owner's behalf. And this is very practical, this is like out there right now. We have the software to introduce that into a client. And my biggest thing is I'm seeing that in its infancy, right? There's other companies that are already really using it in a big way. We're talking about the small business owner for $100 a month can implement this into their business. It is not unaffordable. It is very practical, and with the right guidance and coaching that we've talked about, you could implement it in your business within a few weeks, likely, and get real results from it. So that all aside, my point is that if you're not adapting that or not looking at it in the relatively near future, here's my challenge. It's not that your business is going to fall by the wayside. It's that your competitor is going to come into the market, a newer one, right? That is tech savvy, is going to introduce it, and they're going to beat you to the punch time after time after time. And eventually you're going to be left as archaic and as a newspaper was, 10, 15 years ago, as the, horse and buggy was 120 some years ago when the car was introduced, right? It's literally going to be that kind of evolution. And I watched it happen with paging. Pagers were all the rage. Our company just invested $250 million into two-way paging technology. And literally within 2 years, paging disappeared. And it was replaced by digital cellular service, wireless service at that time. So that's not going to be much different. And the difference is in these small business owners, people who did it for 20 years are all of a sudden going to be like, oh, wait, I have to do this. You don't have to, but I can tell you right now, somebody else is going to figure it out. And the average client is looking for that kind of engagement, that kind of service solution. And that's where they're going to get hurt. And that's the challenge that I see for them. And so that's a great example of an AI application. It doesn't require a lot. It doesn't cost a lot of money. It will take a little bit of time to understand it, like we were talking about. But the implementation can be huge for your business. What are your thoughts on that near term, and then maybe even a little bit further down the road? Let's talk 5-10 years from there as well.
Yeah, so I want to take a very controversial position on this.
Okay.
Everybody says that businesses who don't adapt to AI will go out of business. I do not believe that. The Amish have been very wealthy as a community for a super long time, and they have not adapted to any technology. So it really depends on what your goals are in life. You know, I get the marketing behind it. I do it sometimes in my videos where I'm like, use AI or get left behind. But it's a marketing tactic if I'm being totally transparent. But that's kind of what you have to do when you're punching through the noise of social media. Anyway, with that, it really depends on what your goals are. If you want to stay in business and be successful, and successful in this context is doing enough revenue to the point where if you want to pass it down to your children or sell the company so you can retire someday, you are more than likely going to have to adopt these tools. If that is not your goal and you just want to there's still, Eric, I know people that run repair shops that don't even have a computer, man. And they still get business all the time. They do pen and paper. So there will always be a place in the market for the analog, antiquated way of doing things. Always. That will never go away. If that's the game you want to play, it'll always be there for you. That's going nowhere. But if you want to be a real player in the business and try and, surpass your competition, sell a business, you are going to have to start using AI. So that is like just one thing I want to put in there. And so in the near term, what I would say is that businesses right now, I think it's 80% of Fortune 500 companies say AI is mission critical. And about 30% of small businesses are trying to figure out how to implement AI into their business. So I think what you're going to start seeing are a lot of companies that are implementing AI for customer service, maybe helping out with some sales calls, and just trying to free up some time so that way they can figure out where they can add value. Now, if they're a little bit more advanced in their AI skills, they're not going to necessarily be going for saving time right away. They're probably going to be going for a quick ROI, which is what you were talking about in the lead generation services or the voice agents that have come out that people are using from real estate to insurance to finance. And so it's really going to be the low-hanging fruit that will be incorporated into a lot of businesses. So a lot of the customer facing things, a lot of the marketing and sales are going to be incorporating some sort of AI. And so in that near term, the businesses are some of them are going to be overly ambitious and think they can get rid of all of their people. And they're going to realize that that was a horrible mistake. And now they need that domain expertise to help train their AI to improve on their sales calls, or to improve on their email marketing, or to provide better customer service. So the near term, I think, is going to be a game for small businesses of low-hanging fruit and trying to figure out what works well, measuring your KPIs, which don't even think about implementing AI if you don't track your KPIs. Like, you're not going to know if it works. You're not going to know if it works. It's like a totally bad idea to do. Like, you're putting the cart before the horse. So, and I'm assuming everybody is hopefully doing that. So then the next step, like long-term, 3 to 5 years, it's very hard to say, but I am not of the mindset that we will have AGI in 3 to 5 years. I think it's farther away off. I don't know how far. I tend to be a lot more skeptical and critical when it comes to those narratives because that implies that it has an IQ. Like an actual IQ, general intelligence. It can learn autonomously, doesn't need to be trained on data sets to learn. And we're a long way away from that, like a long way, in my opinion, from what I see. Now, I'm not actually building these tools or anything like that. So there are people out there who are far more experienced and have a different degree of expertise than I do that would probably argue otherwise. But I think in 3 to 5 years, most businesses that want to survive in the current economic system as it stands to be a player in the business market at large, you're probably going to see a lot more. I wouldn't think it would be far off to see like co-CEOs, co-CFOs having more like personal assistants that are specialized AI tools to help your leadership, to help your sales team. So just creating more additions to your team that will provide better feedback immediately and help expedite your processes and get you quicker ROIs. I also think that we're going to see the usage for certain AI tools in new and novel ways from certain industries. And I think that in 3 to 5 years, we're going to be hearing stories about the customer service lady who ended up creating a $1 million business while she was working at her company because she figured out how to create this new AI agent that can contribute and revolutionize customer service in some way. So I think that that's going to be more so likely to occur in the next 3 to 5 years. Long term beyond that, man, that's a very interesting conversation I'd love to have with you. But yeah, that's where I kind of think things are going, in my opinion. But we don't really know. We're going to see how the technology plays out. But that's where I kind of see things going.
Yeah, appreciate that. And the you had to pull the Amish card on me, really? Having grown up in Lancaster, home of the Amish, and knowing that you're from Ohio, and right? But ironically, I think that it's a valid point, right? They've been around for a couple hundred years,
yeah,
and sustained with virtually no technology for all intents and purposes. However, it's also the evolution is drawing away, right? I mean, that there's part of the challenges there, but
and nobody's going to buy an Amish business. Nobody's going to buy an Amish business. They could be doing $200,000, $300,000, $1 million a year. Nobody's going to buy it because it's all on them. So that's why, like, I made that distinction. If you're not going to start your business, or anything like that, you can survive with analog. You don't need it.
Yeah, it's a great point. Yeah. At the same time, if your goal is to grow, scale, whatever, it's not feasible, and not with the competitive landscape that's out there today.
Not at all.
Yeah. So, great point, and I appreciate that distinction because I think that's really valuable. Because I do have a tendency to be like, because I'm a big picture thinker, I'm like, no, there's no way you can't. There's just too many use cases already where we've demonstrated the ROI significant, but identifying what that looks like longer term, much more challenging. There's a ton of the last thing I wanted to touch on was, and it's not directly related to AI, but it is in the sense that quantum computing is evolving in a rapid pace, and just because of the ability for quantum computing to have a direct impact on the ability for AI to learn at a more rapid pace, because basically it's learning right as it goes. And the one thing that quantum computing does, and I spent about 3 hours researching this pretty extensively, but the best way I can describe it is that when you learn traditionally, we learn as humans, we learn in a linear way. So I tried this, then I tried this, then I tried this, then I tried this. And that progression of experiences is my learning progression, right? And that's how I gain knowledge, wisdom. Well, with quantum computing, so computations is a good example, right? It'll do computations linearly. I don't care how fast you process it. If you're doing it linearly, it still has a time, not a constraint, I guess, but there's a time limitation, like how long it would take to learn. However, if you could test 1,000 theories at the exact same time, that completely changes how fast you can learn, right? And heaven forbid you could test 1 million theories at the exact same time, which is what basically quantum computing allows you to do. So if I had to linearly test, even if I did it in microseconds, if I had to linearly test them and I had 1,000 computations to do, it's still going to take me some time to figure that out and learn that process. If I can do all 1,000 at once, 1 microsecond, it completely changes how quickly it learns. And that's where I think, and a lot of the stuff that I've read and researched, that's where the impact in AI could really exponentially grow. And I know that that's being tested in those facilities that are a few miles underground, where Well, just because the quantum computers themselves have to be cooled at some ridiculous, I can't even remember, 140 degrees below Fahrenheit or something like that. But that aside, my point is that that I think is the part that I find very interesting, maybe a little unnerving. Right?
Well, I have a controversial view on quantum computing as well, man. I don't think that we're close to quantum computing in any sense of the way. I think we're like a generation away, like 30 years. The reason I say that is because there's like, to my knowledge, there's like 4 publicly traded quantum computing companies, and 2 of them are known scam. Like they do not produce good quality of anything. There's no commercial use case. And then the other 2, there's no clear way to commercialize it, to make money from it, to even produce it on a commercial level for even residential level. Like it's all in the theory space, and it's mostly confined to highly scientific things for extreme precision and speed. And none of that will really have an effect on our lives anytime soon, I don't think. I think that we're far away from it, and then we'll see exactly where it goes from there. I know that there's like ideas of connecting it with AI, and I think that will certainly be a thing, but that's also why I'm skeptical as to how fast we'll get to AGI. I'm skeptical to how fast these things will really occur. You know, you have people talking about Sam Altman wrote a blog article about this, that we are currently in the singularity. And I think what's really going, and for those of you who don't know what the singularity is, it's just the horizon event where humanity progresses at a rate that is incomprehensible. Now, we can debate as to whether or not we're actually progressing or regressing. Those are all like, who's defining how we're progressing, right? Like, we can talk about, I just try to, and just so people understand, like now I'm coming across as this anti-computer, anti-technology guy, but I just try to come from it from a very realistic standpoint. And so with that, I think that we are very far off from a lot of these fairy tales. So singularity, as I was saying, we're very far from that. Like people are saying that we're in it now. And I think the reason why these narratives are spreading are to plant the seed for a future they want, because the future is predicated on who wins the narrative. Who wins the narrative at scale? Yeah. It's all a narrative game.
Yeah, no, I was gonna, as you're saying that, that's our I mean, that's just the story of the of human evolution right now, right? that it's the influencer economy, really, right? It's like whoever controls the narrative, whoever can put this out there, you know, that really expounds on and creates a significant position. So yeah, interesting perspective. I appreciate that. I geek out on it, as you know, right? So,
me too, man. I love it. I love this.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So last things, share with us a little bit, Luis, about kind of where people could connect with you, what you're working on, what are your key projects that you're focused on right now, and I'll make the announcement. We have we'll be going live on weekly LinkedIn live trainings shortly after the 4th of July holiday. So pretty excited about that. We got that all locked in and ready to go now. So our first experience was a little rough technology wise, but we got that resolved. But we got a lot of good feedback from those who were on the call or the session. So excited about doing that going forward. But anything else you want to share, and some additional insights, and like I said, as far as where people can connect with you?
Yeah. So the one point that I want to drive home, because I am so determined to make sure that this narrative wins out. So I'm doing whatever I can. AI is not alive. It will never become alive. It's a tool. Treat it as a tool. Always treat it as a tool. That's the perspective it should came from. And now these ideas, real quick, on a little quick thing. The idea of AI has been around since antiquity. We've had Western ancient thoughts about it, Eastern ancient thoughts about it. The key distinction between the Western and East is the Western always thought, that we're talking back in BC times, that AI could be, or some artificial being can be imbued with the divine, or that divinity would make it. Whereas the Eastern beliefs were always that it was a tool. It was always that it was a tool. So we do have at a bigger level this metaphysical and philosophical narrative competing right now for, can it be divine? Will it be better than humans? Or is it just a tool? I tend to think that the East has a better perspective on it and it's more grounded. Now with that, that's the most important thing. If you take anything away from me, AI will always be a tool, nothing more, even when we have AGI. Now, where you can find me if you want to work with me, if you want to listen to my content, I have a YouTube channel, Luis Acevedo II. You can see my name on the screen. Now, if you want to work with me and you're a business owner, you could message me on my YouTube or TikTok, which is also Luis Acevedo II. Maybe we can plug some information below, not sure. But I offer educational services for businesses. So if you're a solopreneur or you have a team of 10 plus people, I help anybody in between. We can go over, just figuring out where AI can go into your business and how it can help your business, what you should do. But you can find me on YouTube. It's probably the best place, or TikTok. And that's it, man. I really appreciate your time, Eric, for allowing me to come on your show again, and really looking forward to the webinars.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate it. Thanks again for committing to doing that. I know we're excited about being able to put that information out there, and even more so excited about the things that we can learn about AI as we grow together. So 100%. Thanks again, Luis. It's been an awesome experience. And yes, it'll be in the show notes and once we go live on YouTube. So make sure you look down below to find the contact information for Luis.
Awesome.